guys, welcome back to season 3 of AP Hero Review with can't even say my own name right, Miss Clark. And we are going to jump back into that industrial revolutionary thought here. If you haven't watched my industrial revolution video yet, go first and watch that one because it'll help you a lot to be able to understand these economic theories and societal theories that we're going to get into with the industrial revolution. First things first, Adam Smith. We already talked about him when we talked about the Enlightenment, but he's going to write this book called The Wealth of Nations. And The Wealth of Nations is going to be talking about how a society has to have a balance between supply and demand, and how basically the best way that a government can achieve that is through a hands-off approach called laissez-faire, letting people do what people do best and make their own money. Another person who is going to have an impact on the Industrial Revolution is this guy whose name is Thomas Malthus. And Thomas Malthus is going to have this idea that there has to be a balance between the population and how much food. There has to be, if you grow not enough food for a big amount of population, a huge part of the population is going to starve. And he's going to kind of link his idea to this guy whose name is David Ricardo. And David Ricardo is also going to advocate for the government limiting population. And David Ricardo is going to say that the labor and wages are going to be linked to demand. If people think that times are good, then they will increasingly get more and more, they're going to increase as more people are being born, there's a limited amount of jobs. And so it's going to be more and more people who are going to be competing for those jobs, which means that more and more people are going to be starving because the bosses of the jobs can afford to pay little tiny wages which are not livable. As far as from the opposite, less pessimistic side of how things are going to work, you're thinking of a utopian society. Utopian society is going to be really, really pushed by a guy named Robert Owen, who's going to advocate for a humane workplace. How can we make things better for all people due to the rights of man? John Stuart Mill is going to be talking all about the tyranny of the majority and how we should listen to what the minorities want and not just let the majority overrule them. And then a Frenchman, Louis Blanc, is going to be one of the first advocates for universal suffrage. People didn't really want universal suffrage at the beginning because they didn't trust the poor people of society to be well educated enough to vote for the society. And so they would have rules like you had to be landowning or something like that to make it work. So the biggest name that I want you really, really to focus on and take away from this lesson is going to be Karl Marx. Karl Marx, of course, writes this book called The Communist Manifesto with Frederick Engels. And this book is basically all about how capitalism is going to not be successful in the long run. And in the end, there's going to be this inevitable revolution over class struggle, where the tiny minority at the top who owns a lot of the property will be overthrown by the majority who's at the bottom. And so communism will eventually reign where everyone is equal through government intervention and through government control. And it's a pretty extreme version of it, but basically it's the workman's party as far as everything for the workman is going to be equal. You're going to see the rule of the proletariat, basically that rule of your comrades all working together instead of the very, very high highs and the very, very low lows of societal classes that you're going to see in capitalism. They are now going to be evened through communism. And if you know anything about Karl Marx, you're going to see this is going to be a massive push when we start getting into World War II with the split off into fascism and socialism, with Hitler, Mussolini, and then of course number one, the biggest communist state of all is going to be Russia with the Cold War, and that is eventually going to spread through Asian countries which still exist today, like Vietnam, North Korea, and China. There are some people who took these ideas of the proletariat rule and they took it to an even further extreme called anarchism. And those people are going to be Mikhail Bakunin and Georges Sorel. Probably butchered that one. Sorel and Bakunin believed that they did not have to have any major societal government functions. We don't really need a government, basically ruled by the people. There are they thought maybe for a while they could be ruled by the different labor unions, and that the labor unions could kind of control society through that way without having to have like an official government. And that's going to be a pretty extremist viewpoint that, of course, is not going to really be pushed out into the world, but it's all based off of and centered around the Industrial Revolution and all the social inequalities that are coming out of the Industrial Revolution and how it's going to impact society going into World War I, the social inequalities that led to the rise of Hitler, and even afterwards into modern day.